Welcome to Boreas Wargaming. I am Boreas. If you are expecting someone who knows exactly what he's doing, you are in the wrong place. Go watch Miniac or Dr. Faust instead. What you will find here is not a tutorial on how to paint a miniature, but a video in which I experiment on how to paint it the way I like, and above all, to get it ready to play. I hope it might be useful to you. In this video, I show how I paint Jargrosskun Krelrson, the Barbarian, for the Scarlet Company Warhammer quest campaign. If you want more info on this character or the campaign he takes part in, there is more information in the description or at boreaswargaming.com. A very useful tool for painting is the wet palette. In there, paint keeps fresh longer, so you waste less of it, and you can even keep it in between sessions, just closing the container. As you can see, it is very easy. You just need a non-hermetic box, a cleaning cloth to keep them moist, and baking paper. I painted the 1995 Warhammer Quest Barbarian miniature when I bought the game in the day. Now it is time for a new paint job and for trying to make it better than them. The most efficient way I have found for stripping paint is hot alcohol. It just needs to have a small quantity of water in the mix, so plain 96 alcohol will do. Just half a minute of immersion is enough. When I see the paint blistering, I take the miniature out and clean it with an old toothbrush or similar hard bristles brush. If it is not enough, I submerge the miniature a bit more and clean it again. I file the rest of the tub until it gets flat enough for the temporary base. I scrap the mold lines with a model knife. I carefully carve the details away where they are too mixed up due to the mold making process. An old 25mm round base will do to handle the miniature without touching it directly while painting. It is important to use just enough glue to fix it to the base so we can detach it later. I start with the biggest surface, here being the skin. I use as base layer blushing flesh from Green Stuff World. I need a couple thin layers for good coloring. As you will see later, starting with a color too reddish will cause some problems later in getting a pale Caucasian skin tone. I add progressively Vallejo Game Color's elf skin tone to the blushing flesh and apply it with a fine tip brush. At first, I paint the whole surface of the skin save for the recesses, and the more elf skin tone I add, the less surface I paint. I apply a wash of very diluted Green Stuff World's Redwood Brown to the shadows and places I want to pick out. I apply just enough to be noticed. Adding too much could leave tile marks when drying. I glaze the shadows with the same color to unify the tones. To know where to apply it, I imagine how the lights and shadows would be with a light hitting from above. I use Citadel Base's Rhinox hide as a base color for the boots and bracelets. I paint the inside of the cape a dark red by Vallejo Game Color. I don't exactly know which, the label isn't readable by now. A second layer of Rhinox hide goes for the boots, bracelets and the dagger hidden in the boot. I mix Vallejo Model Color's flat earth with the Rhinox hide to highlight the leather areas. The loincloth and belt are both painted black, in this case Citadel Base's Abaddon Black. Using the mix of Rhinox hide and flat earth, I highlight the dagger's grip. I paint the hairband black too. It is starting to get tricky to handle the miniature without touching any painted area, so I glue Jargrosskun to a cork using putty. I add the Rhinox hide and flat earth mix to the black to highlight the hairband, belt and loincloth. I paint the hair on the color of the boots and the bare skin black too, as always applying a couple of thin layers. The belt buckle, the swords and daggers pommel and girt, and the decoration of the loincloth and bracelets are going to be golden, so I give them a base of Rhinox hide. The nails and brooch of the bare skin and the decoration on the hairband get the same base color. For the shoelaces, I use Citadel Layers Screaming Skull. Then I shade it with a wash of Rhinox hide. I give a Vallejo Game Color's brassy brass coat to the metallic parts I had previously prepared. I apply it only to the recent parts, leaving the brown visible in the crevices. Here is when I notice the Barbarian's skin is red as a German's in Marbella. I try to give it a paler tint with a glaze of elf skin tone. I apply it also to the fingernails of the cape too, but I change my mind and wipe it with a brush dampened. I make sure the glaze is diluted enough and that it doesn't accumulate in the crevices. I apply several glazes of Andrea Color's Prussian blue to the cape to give it the blue shade a black bear's pelt has. A touch of black for the mouth. I highlight the details on the bronze areas with a wash of Vallejo Model Colors smoke. The chain and the blade of the sword get a coat of Vallejo Model Colors gunmetal grey. I give a touch of smoke to the red of the cape too. I pick the shadows of the metallics with a wash of black ink, in this case Citadel Colors. I highlight the details on the golden areas with Vallejo Model Colors Old Gold. I keep trying to improve the skin tone with another glaze of elf skin tone. I give another layer of gunmetal grey to the blade of the sword. I highlight the edge of the sword with a layer of Vallejo Game Colors Chainmail Silver. I give the bear's pellet a dry brushing of shadow grey to give it texture. I apply again a blaze of Prussian blue to give more chiaroscuro to the bear's skin. Another glaze of elf skin tone to the flesh, which is still too red. As you can see, a glaze is a fine layer of very diluted paint to slightly modify the underlying color. The most important thing is that it doesn't pull in the recesses, so I take some away with a brush when it happens. I finally get what's wrong with the skin. One of my painting lights has a one bulb, which doesn't allow me to see objectively the qualities of the tones. The solution, apart from changing the light bulb, is to glaze the skin with a colder tone, one with more green in the mix. I use for that Green Staff World's Peach Flesh. I go over the interior of the cape with another layer of dark red. I highlight the red, mixing it progressively with peach flesh and applying the mix to smaller areas each time. The last lights are applied with a modeling motion to give it the feel of warm materials. To give him a rosy-cheeked touch, I apply a glazing of Green Staff World's Sangria Red. I apply a couple layers of light ochre to the hair. I can't tell the name again, it has worn out too. I wash the hair with smoke. I give it some highlights with the original tone. I mix progressively the ochre with Citadel layers flayed one flesh to highlight the hair where it would shine naturally. I add Americana's titanium white to the mix for the last highlight. To recover the dark tones of the hair and integrate the highlights, I apply a very diluted wash of smoke. I give the cape a wash with Citadel Colors Flesh Wash to give more shades to the bare skin. Then I work a bit more the shadows with a selective wash of black ink. Here comes the delicate moment of painting the eyes. Instead of using white, it is more realistic to use a warmer tone for the sclera or white of the eyes. I use for that the mix of ochre with flayed one flesh. I apply it with the finest brush I have. 2 fine lines make for the scleras. I use the same color to paint the teeth too. I separate them visually from the lips with a wash of smoke. For the base of the nails of the bear, I use a mix of the ochre with the smoke. Jargrosskun is a clear representative of the people of Norska, so for his irises, I use 2 thin points of Vallejo Model Colors Sky Blue. I try to paint the pupils with 2 small points of black ink, but it is too runny. I clean the eyes with a moist brush and go again with 2 points of Abaddon Black. I go back to the bear's nails with a mix of ochre and smoke, lighter in every layer. I give a touch of light to the bear's skin with a dry brushing of shadow grey to the most prominent parts. The next step will be painting the tattoos. To get the miniature ready, I give it a coat of varnish so I can work with the assurance of being able to erase them if I don't like how they turn out. I use Vallejo's matte polyurethane varnish. For the drawing of the tattoos, I use very diluted Prussian blue. As you can see, I twist the brush against the paper so I get rid of the paint excess and get a fine tip. Once the paint is dry, I give them a glazing of peach flesh so the drawings look like they are under the skin. I suggest you not to be as brute as I was so you don't erase them. The good thing is that it gets mended just painting them again. On the face of it, I varnish smoothly the tattoos before applying the glazing. When dry, I apply the glazing of peach flesh. I apply it very thinly all over the flesh, not just over the tattoos, so there are no big differences of hue. With the miniature completely painted, here comes the moment of putting it over its final base. I unglue Jargrosskun very carefully from its temporary base. I gently file the soles, so they make better contact with the final base. I glue a 30mm green staff whorled clear base to it using the Army Painter's super glue. To avoid the annoying frosting this glue leaves when drying over transparent surfaces, I take some glue off with tissue, leaving enough for good adherence. This is Jargrosskun Krelrson, Barbarian of Norseman, from the tribe of the skaelinger and a member of the Scarlet Company of mercenaries and adventurers. May the gods witness his deeds. If you want to follow Jargroskun's adventures, go visit boreaswargaming.com. Thanks for your attention and see you next time.